Hello and welcome to TechRaven. Well, today I've got one for anybody who's thinking of moving up to large format film photography, more specifically 4x5 film photography, such as a monorail like this Toyo, or perhaps a field camera. So if you're new to large format and you don't have any equipment yet, during this video, I'm going to go through the various camera types and which one will be best for you, because there's a lot of misinformation regarding this. So I'm going to bust a few myths with regard to monorail versus field camera. And I'm going to do the same for lenses as well, because a lot of people will say, just get a standard lens, which in this case is 150mm, which is the equivalent of a 50mm standard lens on full frame or 35mm. So I'm going to be busting that myth too, because a standard lens might not be and probably won't be the right lens for you to start off with on a large format camera. So I'm going to be going through some bits of equipment that you absolutely will need and some bits that you don't necessarily have to have, and some ways of making things cheaper for yourself as well. And towards the end, I'll just cover a little bit about developing and printing costs, especially if you're going to use a ProLab. Now, when I say large format photography, there are various formats within this. So the most common two are 4x5, like this Toyo here, because it basically uses 4x5 inch film holders like this, and it uses 4x5 inch film that comes boxed like this. So 4x5 is the most common of the common two, should we say, the other being 8x10. Of course, there's a few others. There's one in the middle, 5x7, and there's a few ultra large format which go even beyond 8x10, but I wouldn't recommend you go down that road at all. So of the two, between 4x5 and 8x10, like I said, 4x5 is the most common, for the simple reason that film is cheaper in 4x5, and so is developing and printing, and it's actually easier to get it developed and printed. It's very hard finding people that will do 8x10, unless of course you're going to do it yourself from home in 10x8 trays, for example. So I'm going to be concentrating on 4x5. Now, I do have 3 pieces of paper here with notes on, so forgive me if I keep looking down, because I don't want to forget anything at all. So first off, I'm just going to bust the myth about monorail versus field camera. Now, this is a professional monorail technical camera. It's a Toyo View 45G, and it's basically a top-of-the-range camera. Now, this is where the first myth I'm going to bust is going to come in, because a lot of people think these are strictly for studio, whereas if you want to do anything out on location, you have to get a field camera. Now, that's not true, because back in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was in London, I had a studio and I knew several photographers that all shot on large format that were doing commercial advertisements. All of them had monorail only, and I'm going to come to why in a minute. But majority of the work that they did was actually out in the field. I'm not talking about halfway up a mountain, I'm just talking about location work. And they still used monorail over field cameras. Now, people basically think a monorail cannot go out in the field, which it absolutely can. Now, the reason that most people will buy a field camera is because on average, they're between 1 and 1.5 kilograms lighter. A camera like this with the lens is about 4.5 kilograms, whereas a field camera will be about 3 kilograms on average. So maybe 1 to 1.5 kilograms lighter. And of course, a field camera will collapse a bit smaller too. However, there's many limitations with a field camera, and in my opinion, the only reason you'd want to buy a field camera is for trekking halfway up a mountain to do landscape shots, because with landscape shots, you're obviously going to want portability because you're going to be doing a lot of walking around. And also with landscape shots, you don't need much in the way of movements, and field cameras are very limited in movements because essentially they're press photographer cameras. So the movements you have, and when I say movements, I'm talking about things like, the tilt and the shift, being able to tilt the lens up and down and swing it sideways, and of course, being able to shift it up and down, that kind of thing. On a field camera, those movements are very restricted. And also on the field camera, on the back, the movement that you have on what's called the rear standard is even more limited than the front. So let me just explain. So here, for example, you've got all this movement that you can basically go that way, and you can basically do it this way as well for swinging, and it goes a long way. You've got a lot of movement there, and then of course you can basically go up all the way up to the top of this rail. I mean, just look how much movement you've got there. That is absolutely crazy, and they're geared and they feel nice as well. And again, the swing on the front, I mean, just look how much swing you've actually got there. That is absolutely incredible. And the tilt, you've got a lot there also. And another critical thing about cameras like this one is that when you're actually doing the tilting, it tilts across the central axis of the lens, like so. Whereas with a field camera, it doesn't. It actually tilts at the bottom here. So this whole thing is moving down, which basically messes up your focusing and all kinds of things like that. So again, with a field camera, the only advantage you really have is it falls up a bit smaller and it's about 1 to 1.5 kilograms lighter. But the disadvantage is all the movements that you have for both the front and the rear standard are very limiting. So when it comes to doing any kind of architectural photography, for aligning the converging lines of buildings to get them to straighten out, a field camera just isn't really going to do it because you're going to have too much restriction in the movements. And same for your depth of field focusing as well. You've got so much adjustment on this one for the swing for getting certain parts of the image in focus that are going across the image frame at an angle, for example, and then you can basically just swing this to get more in focus. With a field camera, that is way more limiting. Another thing about field cameras, even used, they're way more expensive. For example, this one, minus the lens, these go on eBay for anywhere between £175 and about £250, again, minus the lens. A field camera equivalent of this would be about £750, £800, so it's like way more expensive. And for me, I just think a monorail camera, it just looks the bee's knees, doesn't it? I mean, it just looks so professional if you have one of these, whereas the field cameras, they kind of look a little bit toy-like in comparison. So that is myth number 1 busted. You don't need to have a field camera to shoot on location. I take this out on location and it's absolutely fine. Next thing I'm going to cover is lenses. Now, a lot of people will basically say, when you're starting off with large format, get a standard lens. Now, a standard lens on one of these is 150mm. On a full frame, a 50mm lens, or a 35mm film camera, 50mm lens, which is standard, on one of these, that's 150. So you times it by 3. 50mm on this is going to be 150mm on one of these. On 8x10, that's different, but we're not going to get into 8x10. We're sticking with 4x5 at the moment. So when people say, get a standard lens to start off with, I'm thinking, well, why? What you should do is, if you currently shoot on 35mm film or a full frame camera like this one, just ask yourself, what is my favorite lens? What do I use all the time? Now, if the lens that you shoot with primarily is a lens like this, for example, this is 100mm on this camera, that would be 300mm. Now, if you're shooting portraits on 100mm all the time and it's your prime lens, then get a 300mm because that is the lens that you love. That's the lens you use the most. If you're basically doing a lot of landscape stuff and you want 24mm, then again, you're going to times that by 3 and you're going for about 70 to 75mm on one of these for a wide angle. Now, chances are that if you've got a full frame, it's probably got a zoom lens. You're probably using a zoom lens on it potentially. So in that situation, just ask yourself, what focal length do you find yourself using the most? So if you've got a 24 to 70 and you find that most of the time you're at the 70mm end, then get a lens like this one. The one I've got on here is a 210mm, which in full frame is the equivalent to around about 70mm. So it's heading in the direction of portrait lens. So that's what I would do with regard to the lens. Just get your favorite focal length. So look at your full frame or 35mm, and if it's 50mm and that's the lens you love, times it by 3, 150 is what you'd have on that. So that's how it works. Another thing with regard to lenses is get a recent multi-coated one from a good brand like Schneider, Rodenstock, Nikon, Fuji. This one I've got on here is a Rodenstock. So if you get those lenses, make sure they're multi-coated. It will either say multi-coated or have MC on it. So that's what I'd recommend with regard to lenses. Next, we have film holders, which come like this. It's just a standard film holder. I think this one's got a piece of film in it. Let me just sort of open this up and have a look. Yep, there's a piece of film in there. I've got another video on how to load these. I'll put a link in the description below. I did a dedicated video on how to load 5.4 film into a film holder like this. And in that video, I also cover a lot more detail about different brands of film holders as well. But just to give you an idea, this budget one, well, I say budget, it's just basically an independent brand. It's a Fidelity Elite, and this one here is a Toyo. Now, the difference in cost is quite considerable because the Toyo ones are about £100 each, although you can get them used on eBay for anywhere between 30 and about £50, depending on the condition. These ones are a lot cheaper. You can get these for about £15–20. But the reason I'm not too keen on some of the independent brands or lower budget ones is because they just don't feel quite as good in terms of quality. And this bit here at the bottom, for example, when you take a data slide out, it doesn't actually click close, it just sort of flaps around. So when you put your film in and you go to close this bit can still be out on the outside, if that makes sense. Whereas on a good quality one like the Toyo, when you remove the data slide and you pull that out, it clicks back into place like that. So when you close the data slide, you know that it's going to go under that. And also these little retaining levers here at the top that you can turn to stop the data slide coming out, they're nice and stiff. Whereas on some of the cheaper ones, they might not even have these. So the data slides will just be free to come in and out, you know, at will. And also they're not tight enough. They can basically just move on themselves to the side. So you turn it like that and the data slide won't come out, but then it can just basically move very easily. So I would recommend going for a better quality one, be it from the likes of Toyo, Sinar, Arca Swiss, Linhof. Just make sure you get good quality film holders. Okay, the next thing I would recommend buying is basically a blower brush to clean your film holders. So you basically remove the data slides and you can blow all the dust out to make sure there's no dust in them. A lot of people use a combination of blower brushes and maybe a fine hair, very soft brush like a paintbrush thing that you can just use to paint away the dust, because dust is the enemy when it comes to film. So you want to make sure that you're dusting inside of these to get any dust out of them. Next, you're going to need a nice sturdy tripod. Now you don't have to go mental with the tripod. It doesn't have to be huge. This is a Manfrotto 055. Now this is the aluminium one. Now I got the aluminium one over the carbon one because with the aluminium 055, the legs just feel stiffer and more solid. I've actually got a carbon version of this, an 055, which I'm filming myself on right now, but the legs are a little bit flexible. They bend ever so slightly in comparison. So I prefer the 055 aluminium because it's stiffer, feels a little bit more rugged. Yes, it's a tiny bit heavier, but they are of course a lot cheaper because they're aluminium and not carbon fiber. Now the tripod head that I have on this one is a Manfrotto 808 RC4, which is a good quality pan and tilt head. So you've got movements here for going up and down, and you can basically shift the camera this way or that way. And then of course you've got the panning section at the bottom with various spirit bubbles on it as well. And the thing I like about this particular head is the actual platform at the top is nice and big, so it's great for securing a monorail or field camera to the top of it. So that's what I'd recommend there. In fact, this, you know, I can't recommend this Manfrotto tripod and head combination enough. It's just really solid and perfect for cameras like this. Right, the next thing you're going to need is a good quality magnifying loupe. This one here is made by Nikon, and the reason you're going to need a magnifying loupe is because when you focus on cameras like this, you have to put the loupe up to the ground glass screen on the back when you're focusing. So as you're focusing with the lever here and you're focusing the bellows back and forth, you'll be looking through this magnifying loupe at the ground glass screen, because these are actually quite dark and you can't just look at them to get critical focus. As you can see here, we've got the focusing knob at the front, and while you're doing that adjustment for focus, you'll have this up to the screen and you'll put your eye up to it and you'll get critical focus on the ground glass screen using a magnifying loupe like this Nikon one. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is a dark cloth. Now, dark cloths are a bit of a weird one. This is where you can save some money because you can buy a dark cloth, which is basically just like a hood, a bit of material like this that goes over your head. So when you're looking at the ground glass, this goes over your head, especially if you're outside where there's a lot of sunlight. And this just basically shields out any light, so you can actually compose your image on this ground glass screen on the back of the camera. Now you can buy these on eBay, you know, the Chinese ones for between 30 and 60 pounds, off Amazon for sort of 50 pounds, 60 pounds, that kind of thing. Some companies charge a bit more, like anywhere between sort of 75 and 100 pound, but you can save a stack of money here because all I did, I basically bought some blackout curtains. Now, yes, they come with these metal loops on them, but you can just cut that off and it's basically the same thing. It's just blackout material. Now these in the UK, they're £15, it's about $15, but this was actually reduced to just £3.75 for a pack of 2. This is what they look like. I just basically cut this one out and it's basically just a sheet like this. It's that big, so it's about 1 meter by 1.5 meters. It's white on one side, and you literally just plonk it over your head like that and over the camera like so. So you can save some money there by just basically making that cloth yourself out of some curtain material, some blackout curtain material. And yes, it doesn't have the Velcro to clip around underneath, but you can actually stitch a couple of those in yourself as well. Okay, so next, this is going to be important. You're going to need a light meter. This isn't digital. It's different if you're shooting on a mirrorless camera like this or even a DSLR, because light meters just aren't needed with these kind of cameras, because you've got what you see is what you get preview, and even on DSLRs you can just take a quick test shot and have a look anyway. So light meters are not needed with digital, but they're certainly needed with film. So get yourself a good quality light meter that does both ambient for outdoors and flash as well. Okay, next, the cable release. Now, this is something that you don't necessarily have to get. I would recommend getting one of these for sure. But if you're to go out on a shoot with your camera and for some reason your cable release wasn't in the bag, you forgot it, then it doesn't matter. Don't worry, because you still have a trigger on these lenses. So when you actually cock the lens, you've got this trigger on the side here. Just like on any other camera, on a camera like this, you've got a trigger. You don't have to use a cable release with this because you've actually got a button that you can press. And same with 35mm film cameras, you've got a button there that you can press. Of course, you can actually screw in the cable release. Now, again, you can basically cock the lens and just gently press that trigger, and that is how you can take a picture. Now, one reason that you would need a cable release is on the front of this lens, you've got various shutter speeds. And if I basically go down to B for bulb, that is where one of these will come in handy, because on this one, if I unscrew this bit here, when I push the cable release, that bit is going to stay out for as long as that is out. And when I push it back in, it will release. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to screw this into the lens here just to show you how that works. Okay, so we have that in there, and I basically cock the lens and take the picture. However, if I release that and then cock the lens again, this time when I press the cable release, I can let go of it and it's going to stay open until I come along and grab that and push it and release it. So that is one of the few reasons that you would need a cable release. Of course, a lot of people talk about camera shake. It's a good idea to use a cable release because you're not going to get any camera shake. But look, I mean, it's the lightest of touches. The amount of pressure that my finger has on that is about the same as the pressure that you're going to get by pressing one of these. So yes, get a cable release for sure. Get a good quality one. This is a Pentax one. I've also got one that I bought, which was a made in Japan Jessup's branded one that I got on eBay for about £10. But get one of these. But again, if you forget it and you're just taking regular shots, it doesn't matter because you have got a trigger switch that you can fire it. So again, a lot of people think you can't take a picture without a cable release because they think there's no switch on the lens, but there is. Okay, next we're going to talk about sync cables. If you're going to do any kind of flash photography, you're going to need a sync cable like this, which has just got this mini jack on one end and the sync socket on the other end. You're going to need one of those. Why? For the same reason that you're probably going to want to need one of these little accessory shoes as well. This will basically go onto the top of the camera here and just sort of tighten down like so. So now we have this accessory shoe. I can now take my flash trigger, plonk that on top here, and when that's on there, I can take my little sync cable, which has got a little jack on one end and the sync socket on the other end. So the sync socket side plugs into the lens, like so. And then the other side is just going to plug into the side of my trigger. So now, when I actually take a photograph, let me just sort of get that shutter speed up. And while I'm on it as well, with regard to sync speeds, you can have it anywhere you want. So this has got shutter range of it goes all the way up to 400 a second, 250, 125, 60. So you can have it on 400 if you want, because it has a leaf shutter in there. And leaf shutters work differently to how a camera like this will work, or a 35mm film camera, for example. Leaf shutters, they don't worry about flash sync speed. You can shoot at any speed you want. So once you've actually cocked the lens and you take the picture, that is going to get triggered and it's going to trigger off and fire all your flashes. So that's why you're going to need a sync cable. Right, okay, next I'm just going to basically break down some film costs that I have here, because the chances are when you're starting out, you're not going to get into developing printing yourself. I'd imagine when you get film to begin with, you're probably going to want to send your film off to a lab. Now, let me just take a sheet of film out of this film holder so you can see what it actually looks like. There we go. That's what a sheet of film actually looks like. 5.4 because it's 5 by 4 inches in size. So when you actually buy film to start off with, and I can recommend this stuff. This is pretty good. This is called Fomapan. It's pretty decent quality film. Now, the reason I like using this, and I'm based in the UK, I buy this from Bristol Cameras. Why? Because it's one of the few companies I could find that actually sell this in boxes of 25. And that cost about £28 to £30 for 25 sheets of this from Bristol Cameras. And most other companies I find, certainly in the UK, only sell it in boxes of 50, which is closer to about £55, something like that. So yeah, check out Bristol Cameras for this Fomapan film if you're based in the UK, because you can get it in boxes of 25, which is probably all you're going to need to start off with. You're probably not going to want to go mad with that. So with regard to film cost, let me just break down it a little bit, just so you know what you're going to be letting yourself in for. So, for example, if you want to buy Kodak Ektar 100 color negative film, 10 sheets of that is £75 for 10 sheets. Kodak Portra 160 color neg film, 10 sheets of that is £64. Kodak Ektachrome, if you want to get into color slide film, 10 sheets is £75. Now, if you're going into black and white, Ilford FP4 black and white film, 25 sheets, £50. Ilford HP5 black and white, same price, £50 for 25 sheets. The Fomapan stuff that I'm talking about here, 25 sheets is 28 or 29 pounds. So it's getting close to half the price of the Ilford stuff. Or a box of 50 sheets of this is £45. So that's the cost to buy the film. And don't forget that when you buy it, you've got postage costs as well on top of that. So the company's probably going to charge you £4 or £5 to ship it to you as well. Now, for developing and printing, for black and white, developing only for a single sheet is approximately £3.60 UK price. Okay, if you want to basically develop a single sheet and get a high-res TIFF scan, that will be between £7.50 and £12 per shot. So with the TIFF scan and the developing, about £12.50, and then if you add on that the cost of the film, you're kind of up to about £14 per shot, and that's without any printouts of any actual fibre-based prints or anything on paper. This is just for the scanning and the developing of the negative. Now, when it comes to colour printing, for colour negative, developing per sheet, £6.75 on average, and per sheet with scanning is between £7.50 and £12 per shot. That's for colour negative film per sheet. Now, for E6 colour slide film or transparency film, developing only is about £10 per shot, and developing with a high-res scan, about £18.50 per shot. So if you think £18.50 per shot for transparency film, plus the cost of the transparency film to start with, which is about £75 for 10 sheets, you're looking at about £26, £27 per shot on transparency film. Okay, so it can get a little bit expensive. So I would recommend definitely starting off with some black and white Fomapan like this, because you're going to make a few mistakes at the beginning. So you're definitely going to want to use some cheaper film and find a place that does it as cheaply as possible. Okay, what have I got next? I'm just going to cover a little bit about the potential risks. Now, obviously when you're shooting digital on a camera like this is a Canon EOS R5 Mark II, there's no risk basically, because you've got the shot, you've got a couple of cards. So I always shoot redundant to this camera. I've got 2 cards in the card slot that shoots the same thing to both. So if one card gives up the ghost, it's already backed up on the other one. You've got your images instantaneously. You can basically put them onto your computer and you've got them straight away. With shooting on film like this, the problem you've got is once you've actually shot the film and you've removed it from the film holder, and you basically put it into the black bag and your little box and whatnot, and you have to send it off then, unless you're lucky enough to be within driving distance of a lab, but most of us will have to send it off. Now, when you send it off, this is where the first risk comes in. It can get lost in the post, or worse still, it could fall on the floor in the sorting office and a careless sorter worker might stand on it and damage the film. So it could get damaged or lost on the way to the developing lab. Now, When it gets to the developing lab, there's of course another risk that the lab engineer that's basically doing the developing that day might potentially mess up your negatives. He could get the temperature wrong, might have had a little bit too much to drink the night before, and he could get the temperature like 5-10 degrees too high or too low, and your images could be like well overexposed or potentially even damaged. So there's a small risk at the lab as well, depending on who's doing the developing and printing, and they could potentially even get lost there. Then, of course, when they've done them, they've got to send them back to you in the post, which brings me back to, it could get lost in the post again or potentially damaged. So there is a tiny bit of risk there as well. So if you're shooting on a camera like this, if you also have digital like this, maybe take this along as well and then shoot the same thing twice, potentially. So at least you've got the backup copy as well. So that's just a few of the potential risks that could be involved in it. So yeah, that pretty much brings me to the end of the video. So I hope you find it useful and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, and if you enjoyed it, maybe I'll see you in the next one. So until then, bye for now.